Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, a nationally ranked community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, and North Carolina. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. Good morning, Hokie Nation. We got the whole football crew on set for a Victory Monday. Virginia Tech takes down Wake Forest inside Lane Stadium on Saturday, 30-13, the final score. We'll talk about all that and so much more. It's coming up, episode 321 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. We bring you your post-W podcast on Monday, October 16th, 2023, from our Tech Sideline studios here at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and do us a favor, refer to the show to a friend as well. Let's go ahead and introduce our football crew. Same fellows as always. To my right, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way, senior staff writer Andy Bitter. In the fourth chair, managing editor David Cunningham. The mustache man behind the scenes, Mr. Nick Brown producing. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Fellas, first and foremost, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. This episode, though, is also brought to you by Coldwell Banker Townside Realtors, trusted real estate services for the Roanoke and New River Valleys. If you're in the market to purchase or sell a residential property, or if you're looking for land or investment property in Southwest Virginia, we have you covered. With 3 offices in the area, we serve Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Radford, Roanoke, Salem, Vinton, Smith Mountain Lake, and all of the surrounding areas. Visit cbtownside.com to learn more. 30-13, the final score on Saturday. Another win for the Hokies. Really just seem to be kind of moving up trajectory-wise here. That is 2 of the last 3 in the W column for Virginia Tech. Your initial reactions, Chris, I know you were out of town, but you were watching the game. You watched it post-game. Andy, David, what did everybody think of the win?
I thought it was very similar to the Pitt win, obviously, and with the way Tech dominated the game statistically, the margin of victory, all that stuff. Throw out the Florida State game because they're a top 5 team, but it seems like Tech has an identity for sure on the offensive side of the ball now. And we'll get into this later, I'm gonna write an article later this week with video review about things that have changed in Tech's offense and schematically and from a play design standpoint. I think they're running an offense that suits their talent well, and we're finally getting to see the actual talent level of the offense, which I think is strong enough to go to a bowl game, and I've always thought it was strong enough to go to a bowl game, and now we're starting to see it, and hopefully, I think they've got confidence now. I think when you win 2 out of 3 like that, I mean, if you extrapolate that over a whole season, you're an 8-4 football team if you win 2 out of every 3 games. So, and that's about the level that I think the Hokies are playing at right now. They've got a lot of winnable games ahead of them, so that preseason goal of making a bowl game is still very much on the table.
Yeah, Andy, what'd you think?
Another impressive showing by Kyron Drones, and probably the most complete defensive performance in the Brent Pry era. I know Wake Forest offense is not what it's been in the past, but they got after the quarterback. 7 sacks, first time in a while they've done that. Forced 3 turnovers. I think gave up 35 rushing yards for the game. I mean, that is a strong defensive performance, regardless of who the opponent is. So, we credited Tyler Bowen for the stuff they did on offense before. Credit Chris Marv for getting this defense in ship shape here, and really plugged up some of the holes that they've had in recent games. I thought it was, I started my story. They had Bud Foster out there to do "Let's Go Hokies" chant. It's like, we need to make life miserable for those guys wearing white, and well, the defense did in that game. That was sort of a vintage defensive performance by Virginia Tech.
To piggyback off of what you said, last time that they had 7 or more, they had 8 against Miami back in 2016 in the sack category. So that was definitely huge on Saturday.
Well, I think they had 7 against Duke in 2020. I believe.
Okay.
At Duke. So they equaled that total. Antoine Power Island, huge game, 4 sacks, really just, went into overdrive there on that final drive. First time since J.C. Price in 1995. So some nice symmetry there with his position coach being the last one to do it.
I guarantee you that no Tech players ever had 3 sacks on one drive before.
Yeah, that might be tough to do.
Yeah.
First of all, it's tough for a drive to continue when you've had
that many sacks
on it already. So that might be a record. But we'll see if Damien Sallis can get on that one. See if he's got the history there.
What did you think on Saturday, David?
I think this is the second straight home ACC game that Virginia Tech has been in control the entire game. And that's not something that was said last year very often at all. That's not something that was really said in the first 2 home games. Even that Old Dominion game, the only point Tech scored in that first quarter was a safety. The Pitt game, this game against Wake Forest, Virginia Tech was in control the whole time. And yes, it was a 1-possession game or a 2-possession game until Tech scored that final touchdown, Jalen Lane, late. But this was a game Virginia Tech had completely control. The defense did its job. Brent Pry talks about complementary football. The offense had its best output in the Brent Pry era, most total yards since the UVA game in 2021. So everything kind of came together. This is what we've kind of been expecting. Like, we thought it would kind of get here at some point. We just didn't know when or if it would after seeing the offensive struggle for so long, and seeing the defense get completely gashed week after week after week after week. These are 2 really good Wake Forest running backs, and this is a Wake Forest offensive line that has a lot of sacks. Yeah, I think the most surprising thing to me was how stout Tech was in terms of the run defense. No big plays allowed. Held Wake Forest to 35 yards rushing. Like, that is a strong performance against 2 really good veteran running backs. And on the other side of the ball, the Virginia Tech offense was methodical and moved it. And that's something we have not seen. We've kind of seen in spurts. But that second half, I wrote about this in my story after the game. Tech's last 3 drives took over 14 minutes. That was almost 50%, over half almost, of the team's total time of possession. Tech moved the ball. Tech was methodical. The right plays were called. All in all, it's just kind of the performance that Tech fans had been wanting and expecting all year.
Found this stat really interesting, guys. Quarterback Kyron Drones threw for 321 and rushed for 65, joining Brian Randall and Gerard Evans as Hokies to have a 350 game in the last 25 years. Even Mike Vick never threw for 300 yards at Virginia Tech, which is crazy.
Vick's games were generally over by halftime. The second half was the Dave Meyer show. But the only play I saw 2 plays on Saturday. The rest I didn't see until I got back. But one of the plays I saw was the RPO to Jalen Lane, which the timing of that was perfect, obviously right after the kickoff return for a touchdown. It was well executed by all parties. Wake played it exactly like I would have played it if I was a defensive coordinator. You show RPO, the safety attacked the line of scrimmage. And because this year, Virginia Tech with Drones at quarterback, they've been a stronger running team than they have passing team. So you tell your defense, okay, if they're running RPO, make them make the throw, because they haven't been able to do that very much this year. And boom, he read it perfectly and made the throw. And those RPOs, they always have a chance to break for big plays. Like, I remember specifically Hezekiah Grimsley against Marshall in 2018. Sean Savoy at Boston College 2019 or 2017. I think the long gain Caleb Smith had last year at UNC to start the game, which was one of the few good plays Tech had in that game, was off an RPO. Those plays can go for big plays when the timing is there and they're executed properly. So now it's on film that Virginia Tech in the passing game can execute that play, and defenses will have to respect that. So, hopefully that goes a little ways into opening up the running game even more.
Yeah, I thought Kyron threw the ball very well, and I feel like we always put a qualifier on it, like, oh, well, you got to smoke and mirrors, and you got to throw back and screen stuff. I just thought he threw the ball well, period.
Yeah,
there was no qualifications with that. He was a quarterback back there who threw the ball well. There's one play where Wake Forest brought the blitz off the side. He sidestepped the guy, stepped up in the pocket, kind of rolled right. It's like, it feels like your first instinct as a quarterback might be to take off running, but he kept his eyes up. He saw Steven Gosnell hit him 18 yards, and they were backed up. It was like 2nd and 18 because of a penalty and a loss after that. So I thought that was one of his better plays. There's another one where he was rolling to his left and like stopped and threw it back across his body, and I think it was Gosnell again.
That was a unique play because so far this year, whenever he's rolled out, it's always been to his right.
Right. Yeah.
And this was one where he actually did roll left and then threw it back across. And again, that's something else that's on film now. So you have to you always respected the rollouts to the right with him, but now you have to think, okay, it might come to the other side also.
Yeah, so I just thought, very good showing by him. And I was texting with his dad last night. He's like, can you make sure that people know how to pronounce his name? It's Kyron, like Byron. It's like, it's not Kyron. It's not like the emphasis on the second syllable. It's not Kyron. There's no E or anything at the end of it. It's Kyron. So
is that what people? Is that what the announcers?
I don't know if the announcers were saying it wrong. I never have the volume up on my thing. I think most Hokies fans know it's Kyron, but for just get it out there into the ether that it's Kyron, not Kyron.
There we go. It's out there. It's Kyron Drones. He played absolutely fantastic. His best game, I think it's safe to say, no doubt.
No doubt.
I mean, Pitt. He looked good against Pitt. Don't get me wrong. More big plays against Pitt. But I thought it was almost more impressive to see him actually methodically put drives together.
It was a little more methodical for sure. I thought the game management was strong. The offense itself got off to a slow start, but I think they grew into the game for sure. I mean, if you had told me, I'm keeping up with the game on Twitter, of course, and while I'm at the wedding, and actually my whole row was doing that at the wedding. But if you told me after the first quarter that Virginia Tech was going to end up with 30 points and 462 yards of offense, it didn't seem like things were heading in that direction. I know you guys were doing the Beamer memes at the end of the first quarter.
It was too perfect. I made that with 8 minutes left. I'm like, please, nobody scores so I can tweet this thing.
You were cracking me up, Andy. I was down on the field, and for whatever reason, the first time ever I had cell service in Lane Stadium. That was incredible, and I was following along with your guys' tweets, and it was very entertaining.
I love some of the things they're doing, and again, I will put this in a video later this week. There was one play where they called a fake screen pass to the left, where the running back and several of the offensive linemen took off to the left on a screen pass. Drones rolled right and had Daquan Wright ahead of him as a lead blocker. It didn't really work very well because Wake, to their credit, was disciplined, but that was a misdirection play that would not have been in the playbook 3 weeks ago. And there was another one later where he rolled. No, he didn't roll to the right. It was a run play to the right. But Jalen Lane had come in motion, and he was like behind Drones. And he was there. I don't know if Drones actually had the option to do it or if it was just a fake. But Jalen Lane was coming around in motion where Drones could have done one of those backwards passes to him, almost like an option play, except it would have been a pass type. Just things like that haven't been there. And I think they did him a disservice with like the type of offense they were running earlier. And I think the type of offense they're running now really suits his skill set. And you're starting to see the player that he can be.
It's shown. It's shown with the numbers, and the numbers haven't lied. Let's play a little bit of buy, sell, or hold with the results here. Andy had a fantastic week. Ended up going 10-4.
Oh man,
on the week, which is pretty impressive. Chris,
where's my money? Is that how this works? We had money riding on this, correct?
Unfortunately, Chris went 6-8 on the week.
Which ones did I get right? Did you write that down?
We'll go through. Oh yeah. And then David went 7-6-1. He held, and from now on, we're doing no more holds. I had somebody tell me, "Oh, love the buy, sell, or hold, but you got to take the hold out of there." He's like, because they can cop out with the
holding's
hold.
cheating.
So no, we're gonna go no more hold after this week. But let's go one by one here. Tech scores first. Andy bought it. Chris and David sold it. Tech did score first in this ball game. Somebody leads by double digits at some point. That did happen. Virginia Tech obviously won by double digits. Andy bought it. David bought it. Chris, you sold that one. Yeah. Kyron Drones has 4 or more passing plays of 12 or more yards. Yes, he did. He had 4 of 20 or more, 11 of 10 or more. Don't know exactly how many were 12 or more. We'd have to get specific with it. Nevertheless, Andy bought it, Chris bought it, David held on it. So that's your one tie. And then you guys nailed it. And then Kyron Drones goes turnover free. He did go turnover free. You guys all sold that one. So everybody got
He did
that one
fumble.
wrong.
He did have another
They
fumble.
did have
He
an
fumbled.
exchange. That's 5 straight games
That's
for this.
true.
And that was
the ball
Andy's
on the
point.
ground.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But he did not turn it
He
over.
is-
He has
technically.
not had a game this year where he is not fumbled.
Right.
No, it's true. Yeah. And it was Bayshul that he fumbled with, right? It
Yeah,
wasn't
that's
Malachi.
the second time they've had that sort of mesh
Communications.
problem there.
That's right, because that's how the Rutgers.
The
games
Rutgers
go.
one, yeah.
Well, that was what, second play of that Rutgers game. That definitely put the game upside down real quick. Let's see. Kyron Drones, 26.5 passes. You guys all took the under on that. The over hit. He threw 29 passes.
Nearly completes 70%.
Yeah.
Too.
Oh yeah, he
That's
was
the impressive. I mean, it wasn't like that's a lot of passes to complete 70% on.
Yeah, it is.
He was very
His
impressive.
QB rating was over 200. So in my article yesterday, I put his stats from his 2 starts in the what I will describe as the old offense, the pre-Pitt offense, and then I threw out the Florida State game because it's Florida State, and then I compared him to his stats in the Pitt offense, is what we'll call it, and it's like night and day.
Really?
Oh, it's incredible. I should have printed it off, but anybody who's a subscriber can go in and read it. But
Would you like me to read them?
sure.
So Rutgers, Drones was 19 of 32 for 190 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Marshall, 19 of 35, 160 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Pitt, 12 of 19, 228 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. His QB rating of 216, which was miles better from the Rutgers 113 and Marshall 92. And Wake, 20 of 29, 321, 2 touchdowns, no picks, 148.7 quarterback rating.
2 things are happening here. He's getting better, with more snaps he takes, and he's being helped to get better by those scheme changes they made before the Pitt game. That was really good in-season coaching.
I think the most impressive thing to me about Drones is how, and about the Tech, like we've seen times where Tech hasn't necessarily stuck to the game plan this year, and after 2 drives, Tech had just 8 yards. And then that 3rd drive, Tech just figured it out. And over the next 5 drives to end the first half, Drones had 201 yards on 12 passes.
Right.
Over the next 5 drives. It was like all of a sudden on that 3rd possession, something just clicked and Tech kind of started to build momentum from there.
Yep.
How about this? According to Pro Football Focus, the highest graded quarterbacks in Week 7 among Power 5 starters. Josh Hoover at TCU with a 93.6. Spencer Rattler with a 90.1. Jaden Daniels, 89.1. And then 4th in the country this week, Kyron Drones, 87.6.
Match the eye test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Kyle McCord of Ohio State and J.J. McCarthy were the second 2. That's Ohio State and Michigan, respectively. So very elite company there, really, with quarterbacks that are at the helm of some of the best teams in the country, with the exception, I guess, of Rattler and South Carolina struggling.
Sorry to throw off your...
No, go ahead.
No. I mean, I'm sorry. I just threw off your whole thing.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yes,
Not
let's
at
get
all.
back to how I was winning.
Okay, we'll reel it back into buy, sell, or hold. We left off with Kyron Drones, 19.5 carries. You guys all said the under. You were correct, 15. I guess just too much of a workload to do 19.5. And the pass game was working pretty well. Let's see. Griffiths, 220 or more passing yards. The under actually ended up hitting on that, technically. And you guys all took the under. So I gave you all the win for that. But when you put in the 2 quarterbacks combined, they actually did throw for 243 combined.
That wasn't the question.
That wasn't the question, which is why you guys all got the point.
So now you've learned a lesson.
Right. I should say Wake Forest throws for 220 or more. What you got, David?
No, I was going to say, Kern came in. I think that was kind of... Price said afterwards it didn't really change the game plan, but I think it was interesting. Tech had gotten to Griffiths so much this year. He was 8 of 17 with a pick, which was very impressive from Derek Canteen on the sideline. Tech got to him so much that they went to Michael Kern, his first action this season, which kind of tells you how well Tech's defensive front did. Kern finished with 166 yards. In total, the two guys threw for 227. So.
I think the writing was on the wall for Griffiths. What did he come in the game, like 113th in the country in QB?
Yeah, below Phil.
Yeah, he has not been good this year.
No.
So I think that interception he threw on the sideline was just sort of the last
Short
straw.
leash, going into the ball game. Everyone was. I got asked a ton, like, is he hurt, whatever. And I was like, I don't know, because obviously I'm down there, and you actually miss so much when you're actually down there, and you're just so focused on trying to follow the ball and not mess up the footage. But I was like, I think he got pulled, and that is what happened. Then he went back into the game when they hit.
He
Kern.
also didn't look healthy when he went back into the game when I was watching the replay. Yeah, so he might have been banged up some early. It might have been because he's been taking a beating. Like he had been sacked 12 times the last 2 games, including 8 times by Georgia Tech. I mean, this is a Wake Forest offense that gives up a ton of sacks. So I think he was beat up, and he is beat up. So maybe that's been affecting his performances some. But they've got quarterback and protection issues there.
I think one of the big things is Kern is a better passer. We saw that. He threw for 166 yards, was 14-22. Griffiths is the better runner. And he picked up 29 because of 2 sacks, lost 15. Lost 14. He was sacked 2 times, but Tech got to Kern 5 times, which kind of just shows you he was kind of a more in the pocket kind of guy, and Griffiths was rolling out. But when you throw an interception like that, where he kind of just, I don't want to say he airmailed it to Derek Canteen, but it wasn't a very good throw.
No, it wasn't a good throw, but it was a pretty exceptional play. Yeah. Wake Forest, 185 or more rushing yards. That was the under on that. They had 19 net rushing yards. Andy took the under. David took the under. Chris, you said they would have more. Unfortunately, got that one wrong.
Oh, fortunately.
Virginia Tech, 120 or more rushing yards. The over on that, 141. Everybody said the over, so everyone got that one right. Virginia Tech, 200 or more passing yards, well over, 321. Everybody said the under. So Kyron Drones proved you wrong on that one.
Almost doubled us up.
Almost, yeah. Virginia Tech, 4 or more sacks. Everybody bought that. Kind of thought 4 would be the exact line because that was the average that Wake Forest was giving up.
Should have been
game.
Antoine Powell-Ryland for
for real. APR. Tech had 7 in total. APR had 4 of them himself. Tech goes for it on 4th down 1.5 or more times. We kind of did an over-under again here. They went for it just once on 4th down. Really, they didn't have to. There was no like 4th and 1 type stuff where they needed to. And it was a fake punt that ended up going for 17 yards. Cole Nelson showing off his ball carrier skills. What do you guys think of that play?
It was a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
I said that it was entirely believable because they had been so bad on special teams up to that point that they snapped the ball over the punter's head. That added to the effectiveness of that play. Because think about what they did before that. They missed a field goal. It's a long one, 48 yards. They still missed it. Gave up the kick return for a touchdown.
Yeah.
Tucker Holloway caught that ball that was destined for the end zone over his shoulder, and then they got a holding penalty to get back up to the 3-yard line. It's like they had not been distinguishing themselves.
I think they'd kicked one out of bounds.
I think that was after. That was after the later on. But yeah, they had not done well on special teams at that point. So it's like, oh, here's another gaffe. No, wait, they're going the other way. And it was, I mean, the hole that Cole Nelson ran through was like a semi could have fit through that thing.
That was a pretty key part to that drive, though. I mean, this is a 7-point game in the 3rd quarter, and both teams are kind of just going back and forth a little bit. And Cole Nelson, like Peter Moore sold that. I thought Peter Moore had the ball from the press box, and then all of a sudden you see Cole Nelson. That was perfectly planned too. As you wrote yesterday, Andy, you run it once. You run it once and then you can't run it again because that's just like the way these things work because people see it, people will prepare for it. But that was like perfectly timed.
Like how many hundreds of times do you think they practice that? You get one shot at that.
Price said they'd been working on it for what, like 3 weeks?
A couple of weeks.
He practiced that over and over and over. You got one shot
of it. He said Stu had to convince him.
He said he had to talk him into it. Which, it's risky to go for a fake punt like that, man, because they were up by 7 points.
They only got 3 out of it, right?
Yeah, they only got 3 out of it.
Tech only got 3, but that made it a 2-score game, and Tech had only run like 5 or 6 plays at that point. That ended up being a 13-play drive.
Right, and once you get up by 10, like with the way Wake Forest was moving the ball at that point in the game, you felt really comfortable with the 10-point lead. I certainly
it felt more like 30 at that.
Yeah, it felt like more than 10.
Tech has had some great fake punts over the years.
They have.
Shebest was like a master of those.
Oh, yeah.
Dialing those up. He had Mitch Ludwig did the little basketball pass over the top in the ACC championship game that one year, and then they like snuck Chase Mumau.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce his name?
Mumau.
Yeah, he was like ward number 98 or something like that. So he looked like the punter out there, and they got him in there, and it was that Camping World Bowl.
Yeah,
he
Oklahoma
passed
State.
it to Anthony Shagag down the sidelines. Like they're pretty good at those fake punts. So this is
They
another.
put him in a different jersey. No kidding.
Yeah. They had. I think they had him in pregame, like doing some punts and stuff.
He was a walk on.
Yeah.
Walk-on quarterback.
Yeah,
So,
that's genius.
So yeah, no, they're pretty good at those. So there's just 3 fake punts in the last
I think
6-7 years that we've seen.
I think Shebest is retired now, but somewhere he's got like a little black book of all these insane special teams plays.
Yeah, they're pretty impressive.
So Gio, about that drive, if Tech decides to actually punt it there and Cole Nelson does not rush for 18 yards from the 50, Tech gives the ball back after essentially going 3 and out with good field position, starting at its own 46 in about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then, but because Tech faked it, Tech proceeded to run 9 more plays, run about 4 more minutes off the clock, and then in the field goal. Obviously, the 3 points helped out later too.
Interesting stuff. All right. Well, we got a couple more here on our buy, sell, or hold results. The over or the under. The over-under was set at 47. Everybody said under. You guys were all correct. Game ended up 43 total points between Wake and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech -1.5. So we said who you got winning. Andy was the only one that said the Hokies.
There we are.
On Saturday, and he was correct, which was a huge pick for you in the standings, right?
Yeah. Remember, it was a 1 game difference. So now you're back even. So, yeah,
You guys gave me the home favorite, and I didn't even have to take the points. I mean, that was just. I was going to probably take Virginia Tech anyway, even if they were the underdog in that one. But I got into the file. I'm looking at all picks. I'm like, they all took Wake Forest in this one. No believers.
So we've seen it twice now, right? It really felt very similar to that Pitt win, and maybe even a little bit better. Granted, I feel like Wake's offense was kind of just as stagnant as Pitt's in a lot of ways, but it just felt like Tech's defense really showed up. You had a pick, you had 7 sacks, just willed themselves throughout the entire game. Brent probably called it the best bit of complimentary football. Like, how are we feeling now that you've seen it? Okay, it's twice now, and this one was even a little better.
I thought I like this one better than the Pitt win because I think Pitt's offense is very simple to defend. You don't have to think very much. I think Tech did some things against a good offensive staff this week from a strategic standpoint that really made sense. I think Tech's strength on defense is their cornerbacks. And a lot of times in this game, it seemed like they were playing with an extra safety in the box. And even on some of those slow mesh plays, at least one of the linebackers was like attacking the line of scrimmage immediately. So I think they manipulated Wake Forest into throwing more passes than Wake wanted to. I mean, remember, this was a 1-score game until there was 8 minutes left in the game when John Love kicked a field goal to put Tech up by 10. So like the final run-pass ratio wasn't necessarily. I think Wake was throwing it a lot, and I don't think they should have been. I mean, you've got 2 good backs, Justice Ellison and Damon Claiborne, only combined for 14 carries. And if I was a Wake Forest fan, I'd be going on a little bit of a rant like that. I thought Tech locked up and played man coverage on the outside. They loaded the box a little more than they normally do, and really brought in a linebacker a lot. And on the slow mesh plays, that's what Wake Forest quarterbacks read, and then they throw the ball in that situation based on what they read. I thought the Tech defense manipulated this game in a way where they could use their strength, which is their cornerbacks, against Wake Forest's weakness, which is their quarterback. So I thought that was a really, really good coaching job by the Tech defense. And I thought they did a good job using their strength on defense to their advantage this week. And obviously the defensive line had to play well against the slow mesh too, and they certainly did. But I thought that was probably strategically the best game Marv has had as defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think they showed they can beat bad teams at home. I mean, that's what they've done this year. And Pitt's a pretty bad team, despite beating Louisville last week,
which is ludicrous.
Wake Forest now 0-3 in the ACC. You're talking about beating 2 teams that are 1-5 in the ACC. But guess what? The rest of the schedule is bad teams at home and a couple bad teams on the road. With the exception of Louisville out there. I mean, it's there. This team doesn't have Clemson, doesn't have North Carolina, doesn't have Miami the rest of the way. I mean,
Duke, UNC.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. They can do some things with this team. I think it's still clearly a work in progress. I need to see them beat some better teams before I'm like, okay, Virginia Tech is back. They've turned a corner. But you play the schedule that you have and you improve against the schedule that you have, and they've shown improvement so far.
Yeah.
With a top 5 loss in between these two performances, it's been 2 pretty strong ones. They've doubled up their opponents. It's 68-34 in those 2 wins, I believe.
Yeah, I'm encouraged from the coaching aspect of it this past week. I thought the defensive coaches did a really good job. I want to see them now slow down or stop a running game that is a little bit stronger than the ones that Wake didn't make a great effort to run the ball. And Pitt is so limited offensively. Syracuse will be a different animal. I know they're struggling to score, but their quarterback can really run. I mean, he's lit up Tech and Lane Stadium before, and their running back is good. He had over 100 yards against Florida State this past weekend. So they'll be a different animal from a running standpoint, and they're going to come out and try to run it down Tech's throat. I mean, they're smart. So that'll be a different type of challenge. So that's the next step for the defense is to stop someone who's got a little bit more horsepower in the running game.
Chris, to your point, looking at how Tech defended Wake Forest, fewest rush attempts this year for Wake Forest, 31. Mm-hmm. The previous low was 35 against Elon in the season opener. This is a team that ran 52 times against Georgia Tech 2 weeks ago, mm-hmm. and only threw it 17 and 15 the last 2 weeks, and threw it 22, which is second most this year behind its 24 against Old Dominion. Yes, Wake Forest threw for 227 yards.
Well, they threw it 39 times actually with both quarterbacks.
Yes, sorry, that was 22 completions.
Okay.
But yeah, like in terms of Wake Forest playing to its strengths, Tech took that away. Mm-hmm. This is the first, I think, time in the Brent Pry era that this defense, in the ACC, I should say, because I think Tech did it a little bit against Liberty last year, that this defense completely outcoached the offensive staff on the other side and played to its strengths and to the other team's weaknesses, forcing Wake Forest to throw the ball almost 40 times. And yes, Wake Forest still ran it 31 times, but a little bit of
7 of those were sacks.
Yeah, 7 of those were sacks and got just 35 total yards. When you can force Wake Forest, force teams to do things and play kind of into your hands, that's what we saw. And that's kind of the first time this year, I think that, like, talking to Derek Jones, talking to Brent Pry, talking to some of those, listening to some of those defensive guys after the game, that felt like the first time this year where the defense played to its strengths, and that's surprising. Can you build on that? That's the next thing. Can you continue to play to your strengths every single week, or is this just one thing that you saw on film that you were like, hey, we're going to jump on? Like, don't, for the Tech staff, the challenge now is to continue building on that.
I don't see a ton of great quarterbacks on the schedule remaining either. I mean, Louisville's quarterback has played well this year, but I mean, obviously it's Syracuse. Garrett Schrader's strength, he's improved as a passer from a couple years ago for sure, but their strength is still running the football. So I have a very similar game plan against Syracuse. I think if they can beat your cornerbacks one-on-one, then you tip your cap and you adjust, but you still have to stop that run game.
Well, on this date in 1999, worth bringing up, College Game Day visited Lane Stadium. Mike Vick and the Hokies took down Syracuse to make a national statement, beat them 62-0.
That game was such a blowout that game was, I guess, on ESPN, and it was 48-0 Tech, and ESPN actually switched coverage to an SEC game that was coming on later. Wow. I had to listen to the last 2 possessions on the radio, and Tech scored 2 defensive touchdowns to take it from 48-0 to 62-0.
Was that the game day where they would set up in the corner of the stadium?
Yes.
Yes.
It was the first time they came here, right?
Yes. They came to Tech twice that year. They came for Syracuse, and then a few weeks later they came for Miami.
Yeah.
Syracuse was ranked 16th in the country that day, and
I was at
Tech
that
was
game.
number 4.
Yeah.
Was there a more lopsided victory against a ranked team
At that
Virginia
point,
Tech's
no.
ever had? I mean, that's a
At the time, it was the most lopsided victory ever for anybody over a ranked team, 62-0.
That's nuts.
It was
Almost 90% sure that is the one and only time Syracuse was ever featured on College Game Day.
Syracuse
Syracuse had
collapsed after
Clemson.
that game too. It was like they broke.
Never for Clemson. Syracuse never did for Clemson.
Has Syracuse never hosted?
Syracuse never hosted.
Are they
They're
on
one
that
of
list?
5, yeah.
Yeah, because Duke got off the
Yeah.
list this year.
Yeah, that's
UVA's on there.
It's Maryland, UVA, Cuse. There are 2, Cal, and there's one more. Indiana. I think that's the 5.
Indiana.
That would make sense.
I think that's
Yeah.
the 5.
So Vanderbilt's hosted one.
I think
I guess so.
some of those like early runs are like, oh,
Yeah.
Vanderbilt's 5-0 or
Oh,
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Interesting stuff. But so that was a fun one. Needless to say, Chris.
Yes, it was a fun one. Yeah.
All right.
A lot
Very
of fun.
cool. All right. So I want to ask you guys this: the timing of the bye week. You know, they've been banged up all year. Really, just kind of starting to get a little healthier now. Seems like it's coming at a great spot, especially considering it was almost a no-brainer when you have a Thursday night game coming up.
I think so. I think it's it has to be a bye week before the Thursday night. Well, it doesn't have to be, but it should be. So I think it's good. You saw some Tech guys go down. You saw Dorian Strong go down. You saw Mario Kendricks go down at one point. There were a couple others, and
Burgo, I don't know that Burgos played.
I think you're right, because that's why McDonald played so much. And by the way, let's mention him. McDonald had a good game. at
Burgos
defensive
did
end, I
play.
thought.
Did he? He did play. Okay.
But McDonald had more snaps than he's ever had at defense.
McDonald had that
Jordan
big-
McDonald had 21 snaps and graded out as an 86.
He had a big
he played
3rd and 1 stuff.
He did
him
a
and
great
Lawson.
job on that play. Yep. And I think I don't think Tootin's 100%. I think when you look at the yards per carry in this game, Drones averaged 3.9, Malachi Thomas averaged 5.8, Tootin only averaged 2.3. You know, I think his hamstring was cramping up a little bit in the second half against Florida State, and he took that big hit late against Florida State. I don't think he's 100%. So the bye week for him, you know, he's such a workhorse and such a good player. If you can get him back to 100% in the bye week and unleash him on a Syracuse defense that has had all sorts of trouble stopping teams in recent weeks, then you know, I think Tech can play better offensively than they did this past week. I know that sounds weird to say. If he's healthy, you know, if everything else stays the same and then he's a little bit healthier, then, you know, you've got a better offense. So yeah, I think the bye week's coming at a good time.
Here's the thing about the open week, and I'll say the open week, not the bye week. This is a pet peeve of Ralph Russo of the APs, that a bye is when you advance around without playing. Like you get so they're just off this week. It's
Yeah,
an open week.
that's a good point.
So you know, $1 to Ralph there. He's always making that point on Twitter and podcasts, fighting the good fight there. They never come at a bad time. Every time it's the open week, you ask the coach, like, does this come at a good time? They're like, yeah, we're really beat up. It's like, you can pick any point of the season where they're pretty beat up. I think there's one time where the open week came at a bad time, and that was when Cincinnati opened the season with an open week, I think. There's like some bizarre scheduling thing. I think Witt might have been because of some of the dealings that Witt had with the schedule. For some reason, like, they started the season with an open week. It's like, that's not the way to do it. But other than that, anytime during the season, you're going to have some kind of injury that it comes at a fortuitous time. So I've never asked a coach, like, hey, does the open week come at a good time? They're like, no, we're fine. We can play next week. Like, it always comes at a good time. So we'll ask that question this week. And I'm sure Brent probably like, yeah, we're really beat up. Comes at a really good time for us.
I think it comes at a good time for Syracuse too, though, because they're reeling right now. They could probably use a little bit of a reset.
The schedule. I mean, we look at Syracuse and you say, man, they're coming in really struggling. It's like, how many teams in the ACC would be struggling if they played Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State in succession? That's a pretty tough slate there.
But it's the fashion of defeat.
Yeah, they weren't competitive.
They weren't competitive, but I'm guessing how many teams would have been competitive in those games? If Virginia Tech played those three in order, how
Tech scored more
Tech
against
was more
Florida
competitive
State.
against Florida State, I will say.
They
On the
were.
road.
Yeah.
Same location, same time of day. They were both noon kicks.
And it was also the third in a row of difficult matchups.
That's true. That is
And they
certainly
are
true.
they are very banged up. But so
sounds
was
like
Tech.
sounds like the open week came at a good time for them.
Sounds like the
Yeah,
open
there you
week came at the Did you guys see Keon Coleman had like this insane catch.
One-handed catch.
One-handed.
It was like ridiculous.
Yeah.
Dino Babers had a quote, and he said something along the lines of like, "God was showing off when he made him." And I was like, "Wow, what a quote to compliment the other team." Nevertheless, well, guys, anything else you guys want to bring up about this game that we hadn't talked about, especially because we have kind of a bizarre week this week where not sure if we're going to do a Thursday pod because of the bye week. Anything that we're kind of missing here?
Well, I want to go back to Brent Pry's quotes from last season when he talked about the offense, when the offense was struggling. So on Tech Talk Live before the NC State game last year, he said, "You have to make sure that we're not so vanilla that people can really get a bead on us. You have to keep people honest." And then in a press conference before the Miami game, he had said, "We have to be more creative, explosive plays regardless of opponent. You have to open it up a little bit and challenge the defense in some other ways." He made numerous comments like that last season, especially once they got to like the midway point on to the end. He was right. I thought that offense was extremely simple to defend. There was not enough misdirection, not enough moving parts, too easy to draw a bead on. And I think Tech was running basically the same thing for the first 4 games this season. And I think they're at least one game better if they had made the flip to this pit offense, so to speak, earlier. I think you look at what Marshall's defense has done since that game, and they've gotten torched and by Old Dominion of all teams and NC State of all teams. It was a really bad offensive team, and Tech could only muster 17 points. I think if you make that switch earlier, you're in a little bit of a different situation right now, but better late than never. This is the offense I always envisioned Virginia Tech running. There's just, like I said, I'm going to put this on film later this week. There's so many moving parts, so much deception. It's no comparison between this offense schematically and play design and what Tech was running before. And I think it's making a ton of difference. Tech's offensive line isn't very good, but they can still go out there because of the type of plays being selected and things like that. And it helps the offensive linemen. Like they had no chance to block with the offense Tech was running before. Like even good offensive lines, I think, would struggle in that type of offense. So what they're running right now is the exact type of offense I always envisioned. It's what, after all those comments Pry made last year, I assumed that they were going to make a switch like that in the offseason. They didn't. It took them 4 games into it before they finally did. And better late than never, though. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna write that at some point this week and pick some of my favorite plays from like the Wake Forest game and maybe the Pitt game to show examples of what I'm talking about.
I think with the defense, just pointing out how active and in the backfield they were all day. I mean, we saw all the sacks. We mentioned those earlier. 13 tackles for a loss. That was their most since that Florida State game when they had 14 against Willie Taggart, that horrible offense that the Seminoles had out that day. Coming off the edge a lot, too. I mean, Kelly Lawson blitzed off the edge, forced a fumble. Keontae Jenkins, who had a great game. I mean, you look at the stats here, 12 tackles, a sack, 2 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles. I mean, that was his best game of the season. Good to see him. I mean, he's been battling an injury all year. Really played an active game there. And I just thought the entire defensive line really showed up. And that's what they need. I mean, if the linebackers aren't as strong and the run support from the safeties aren't as strong, you need that defensive line to really be disruptors up front, not just eat up blocks. And I thought in this game they did that, and that was pretty impressive. We've mentioned how bad Wake Forest offensive line is, so we'll see if they can do that a little bit against a little bit better groups. But right now they're tied for the ACC lead in sacks. 22, I think it is. That's almost as many as they had last year. Yeah. And I think it puts them 7th, tied for 7th nationally. So that's a pretty big improvement from what was a major shortcoming last season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. When you look at how you feel, we talked about after Florida State, you're like, I feel exactly the same as I did after Pitt, really. Yeah. And how about now after Wake Forest? Like, just watching this, I walked away feeling like this is a team that might go to a bowl game.
I feel a lot better about it. This is how, like I said, I thought Tech was capable of this coming into the season. I thought they had the personnel to do it. I just didn't know they were going to be running that old offensive scheme for the first 4 games. Now that they're running, I think, a scheme that fits Virginia Tech, what Virginia Tech needs to be doing. And Wells could have been running some of this, not all of it, but some of it. Like they could have made this switch before. And But like I said, better late than never. And yeah, I think they have a legit chance to go to a bowl. I think one of the bowl projections that came out this week actually has them in the Fenway Bowl. So
another baseball stadium.
Another baseball.
Come
hey,
on
you know
now.
what?
That'd be cool. That'd be cool. It's the Red Sox.
After going to Boston like a month earlier.
Yeah, but
true.
you made that joke earlier this year that's probably what's going to happen. You go to Boston in November, then you go to
The
Boston in
Wasabi
December.
Fenway Bowl.
That would be so
December
cool.
28th,
Would it?
Andy.
No, it would be
I
cool.
like the Red
Gio.
Sox.
Fenway is cool for
Andy,
baseball.
it's an
games.
11 a.m. kick.
Okay, I'm on board.
But you know what? I'll take any bowl this year. Whatever it is. Let's just get back to one. Let's restart a streak there.
I mean, I think a bowl game feels likely now. I mean, I'm probably on the side of more likely than not. And part of that is how Tech played. Part of that is, the schedule. You kind of change your opinion about it every week. Syracuse looked like a really tough matchup earlier in the season. We should have known. That's sort of what they do is they fade down the stretch. NC State perhaps looked a little bit strong. Oh, they got Robert Anai and Brennan Armstrong reunited. No, their offense is a mess. All of a sudden, that looks a lot more winnable. Louisville, you got, they're 6-0, just beat Notre Dame, go and lay an egg on the road against Pitt. Maybe the score, I think they had a pick six or a couple interceptions that played into that. The yardage wasn't as different there, but all of a sudden that doesn't look as daunting. Probably the toughest game on the schedule left, but not just like, they can't possibly win that one. So, it's the Hokies look a little bit better than what they have before, a little bit more encouraging, and the rest of the schedule looks a little bit more favorable the rest of the way.
I mean, you're 2-1 in conference play. Let's say,
oh no, I know where you're going.
I mean,
with this.
Norrell Pollard said this after the Florida State loss. He's like, we're 1-1 and we want to play them at the end of the year. And I didn't even use the quote because it seems so ridiculous. Right. But I mean,
but when you look
the schedule does set up okay.
It really does. Okay, you have to think at least one more loss somewhere, right? I mean, you'd have to probably Louisville, and maybe one more. You need 3 more to get to a bowl game. There are 5 games left. Correct.
Yeah, you need to go 3-2 the rest of the way. I think that is the goal.
It's very,
very. Can't be thinking anything beyond
it's
that.
It's very achievable. Think about it. I mean, obviously Syracuse has plenty of issues. Probably won't beat Louisville, but it's not impossible now, like you said. I would pick Tech to beat NC State outside of one crazy game against Marshall when both offenses decided to score a bunch when they haven't been doing it all year. I mean, they can't do anything offensively. They have no skill position talent. They scored 3 points this past week. I would pick Tech to win that game in Lane Stadium. Tech's offense is better. Gonna pick them to beat Virginia. I mean, Virginia's really good at losing, apparently. I mean, they're just not a good football team. And who am I missing? BC. That's the one that's
it's up in Chestnut.
It's I hate playing up there. But obviously a very winnable game.
Would Tech be? I think Vegas would probably install them in the favorites for the final 5 games.
Certainly possible.
I think Louisville's the only one where it wouldn't be. And maybe, I mean, you think about BC on the road. I don't know how they would factor in the road thing. Because that's the one thing we haven't seen them do. We haven't seen this team go on the road and perform. So that's a question mark. They have the Louisville game before they go to BC and UVA. But we talk about UVA and BC. And those aren't great teams. They should do well against those teams. But we haven't seen them play like this on the road. And they've lost some games to teams on the road. They're like, should you have lost by that much or to that team?
To that team, right. You're right. And I will say, I've said all season, it's not necessarily the record I'm looking at per se. It's the eye test. And this offense passes the eye test now for me schematically. And it never did. But I hated the scheme they were running before. I didn't see how any way that could work. No matter what. I mean, no matter who was playing quarterback. I mean, we saw Drone struggle with it his 2 games, and then they flipped it, and all of a sudden, boom, you hit the ground running. And I think the eye test for me, they're 3-4. But the eye test, they look more like a 4-3 or maybe in a 5-2 team. Like if you don't play an injured quarterback the second half against Purdue, and then you switch to this offense 1 week earlier, like this offense beats Marshall.
The Purdue loss looks worse and worse in hindsight.
It does.
Purdue just gets beaten down.
Why were you not convinced with the rain and everything?
But they wasted a half in that game. Purdue played a full game. Tech played a half a game because Tech played a quarterback who couldn't walk for the second half. So you do something different there. And then you switch to this offense earlier, and this offense beats Marshall. You're sitting here talking about 5-2 right now, and we're not even having the conversation about, are we going to a bowl game? It's which bowl game are they going to go to?
There's so many of these ifs they go with the season, and could they have done that earlier? What if they have Ali Jennings? I mean, I feel like the weapons have done pretty well lately. And, Jalen Lane is the real deal. I mean, he's showing out. DeQuan Felt making plays. I feel like Steven Gosnell has really stepped up lately. I mean, if you add Ollie Jennings to that group, I mean, this could be a really potent offense. I mean, the offensive line is still a question mark, and that's still going to limit them to a degree. But with the way Drones is playing, the way these receivers are getting open, and the running back threat that they have, not always running the ball, but throwing it to them to get some yards too, I feel like, man, they just like the potential they could have had with Ali out there as well.
And the thing is, like, I'm still also thinking long term, because with this offensive scheme they're running now, you've got Drones eligible for 2 more years after this. So hopefully, finally, maybe you have a quarterback situation where you have a multi-year starter.
You should.
Knock on wood. And then you've got Jennings eligible to return if he wants to. You've got Lane and Felton with eligibility remain. I think every player that's playing on offense is eligible to come back next year.
With the COVID thing, I think it really helped. I mean, you probably could finagle it somehow.
Yeah,
like, I was injured that red shirt earlier on, so that was a medical red shirt.
Right, right. So, I mean, you've got the opportunity to have a stacked offense coming back next year. You keep running this scheme and everybody keeps gaining experience in it and everything like that, then if you close this year in a positive manner, make a bowl game, maybe even only go 5-7. Even if you don't make a bowl game, you'll be able to look back and say, okay, the last 8 games of that season, we started looking like the team we thought we could look like from the perspective of a fan, and now everybody comes back. So it's all about building positive momentum. Tech has done that, and now just keep your foot on the gas.
With what they have left, I think 5-7 would be pretty disappointing.
I don't disagree.
Before early in the season, we're like, are they going to win 4 games? Like we're setting the over under at like 3.5 or 2.5. So obviously we've shifted our thoughts about this team. But now, with how the schedule plays out and how they're playing right now, I think 5-7 would be disappointing. I think a bowl definitely feels like progress, but 5-7 is like, man, you had it there and you just couldn't get it.
So if you had to make a bet in Vegas, Tech goes to a bowl or does not right now, you would.
You can technically get to a bowl at 5-7 if there's room.
Well, let's say 6-6 then.
Right. Right.
6-6, I would bet that they would.
I would too. Yeah.
I would.
I'd be about 60%. Sure.
Yeah,
I would say.
I'd still be a little bit shaky.
But I would still take it. Yeah.
I would probably lean that direction.
Yeah.
How about if this were to be the situation? Well, first, I'd say, granted, this is only my 3rd football season watching Tech football, but by far the most exciting and fun brand of offensive football to watch is what we have seen the last 3 weeks.
Absolutely.
Since I've been here. I mean, more fun than, even though we won some games and beat Carolina my first year.
The schematic change has been more drastic than even the 2019 schematic change, in my opinion. It's just like night and day from what they were doing before. And it's very exciting to see, because this is what I always envisioned, and that's why the first 15 games of the Bowen era was very disappointing to me. But now this is what I envisioned as far as the type of offense Tech needs to be running. So now I'm excited again.
This is more exciting than the 118th ranked offense last year.
Yeah, last year was
it's a low bar to clear.
Yeah, no doubt. But it is fun. It really does. Like, if Tech was going out there, if Tech had they even left some points on the table where you thought, like, hey, maybe they could have got a touchdown there instead of a field goal.
Well, they kicked 3 field goals after getting inside the 20,
and they missed 1 field goal too.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's almost like elements where you're like, they even could have scored more. If they would have scored last year's team, even if they won this game, would have scored 20 points.
Yeah, for sure. And but it goes both ways. Like, Wake missed a wide open touchdown at one point where the guy was 15 yards behind the defense and the quarterback just underthrew it so bad that he had to stop. So you're going to face greater challenges in terms of quarterback talent and things like that, but still, like, not too much more, because NC State's broken, Syracuse is struggling. So it plays both ways, but overall, 30-13 after 38-21 against Pitt,
and one of those is a kick return.
Right.
I mean, you really gave up 3 points.
Yeah, exactly.
Or 6 points.
Yeah, and that's why I'd be ticked if I was
SMA
a Wake
major.
fan. Damon Claiborne, kickoff return for a touchdown. He's had a 100-yard rushing game this week. He had a pretty decent showing against Clemson the previous week, and he has 3 carries. Again, I think Tech manipulated them into that and outcoached them, and that's a great sign.
How's this scenario sound? So, say like they have a mishap somewhere, whether you lose to, I really don't think they lose to Syracuse. You lose to like NC State or at Boston College.
Boston College would be the one.
Right. But you go on the road, like, this would really be, okay, they win 6 games, and on top of it, they beat a top 25 Louisville team on the road. Louisville's not this hostile place to play. That's not like going to beat number 5 Florida State. Louisville at that point, if I had to guess, they're still ranked at 21 right now.
Yeah.
If they are ranked, they'd be like in the 20s.
They really screwed that up against Pitt. I mean, they outgained them 400 something to 288. I mean, Pitt scored 38 points but only had 288 yards. It was just Louisville kind of gifted them the game to a certain extent. Louisville's really physical. Like, they beat up on Notre Dame physically, who then beat up on USC. College football is a weird sport. So I still think winning at Louisville would be a major upset.
Yeah.
I want to be 500 going into Louisville. So then if you're 4-5 coming out of Louisville, you give yourself a good chance.
They're getting level at 500 by beating Syracuse, I think, is key.
Yes.
Because then you have a little bit margin for error the rest of the way. Otherwise, you have to win the ones you have to win. And
you don't want to be 3-6 and say you have to win the last 3 games, right? You have to win on Chestnut Hill, which doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. Well, for anybody wondering, I will say this. I get asked all the time, like, who do you root for when these two teams play? And I say, whoever needs it more. Tech needs it more right now. Syracuse is 0-3 in conference play. Tech is 2-1 and has a chance to maybe do a little something here. So I want Virginia Tech to win on Thursday.
Do UNC Florida State play in the regular season?
They don't.
They do not. Interesting.
That could be that. I thought.
See, I don't know that UNC is going to lose.
Well, that was last week. Everybody's like, "What if Florida State, UNC,
if Ryan
and
Leonard's
Louisville
healthy.
all run the table?" It's like Louisville's never had a perfect season. Like, why are we debating this? Like, there's no chance this is going to happen. And sure enough, last week, Pitt plus 225. There's a reason I know that number. Nice little upset there. But I mean, that's the classic. Like, you win this huge game, one of the biggest wins Louisville's had in recent memory, beating Notre Dame at home. Then you go on the road. It's just such a letdown. I mean, that happens. But Florida State, North Carolina, I don't know if Florida State loses.
Florida State has Duke and Miami still.
Yeah, I just think they're good.
Duke looked pretty good with their
they
backup.
can take care of that. North Carolina,
North
Carolina
defense
has-
is really good.
Yes.
Yeah,
North Carolina has Duke and Clemson on the road.
and they still play NC State, right?
Yes.
And you'd say, oh, they're going to clobber NC State. Weird stuff happens in that game.
NC State beat them last year with their 4th-string
The
quarterback.
team that you expect to lose that game always seems to win that. So that's why I look at North Carolina and I go, all right, I got to see it. I have a little more faith in Florida State running the table and clearing this thing out than I do UNC.
Probably, I would agree with
Did Jordan Travis re-enter the game? Because Syracuse banged him up. He hurt his hand. Exited the game.
I didn't watch 0 seconds of college football, but he came back in.
Okay. Nick Brown says that he came back in because that's big, obviously.
Yeah.
That's a guy that you need, considering he's on the Heisman list. Anything for you or David in the 4th chair?
Yeah, I've got plenty of stuff.
Let it rip.
Who has been your surprise player for offense, defense, and special teams this year? If you had to pick one player from each unit that surprised you, who would you pick?
Surprise. I don't know that anything surprised me per se. Like, it was hard to get a read on Drones in the old offense, like in the preseason. Like, he didn't play well whenever I watched him in practice, but that's hard to judge a player when in that offense, in my opinion. That offensive scheme was so bad. And so I guess I would pick him by default. But I think Benji Gosnell's been good. As a redshirt freshman tight end. He would probably be... I might even pick him ahead of Drones as far as that goes. I think he's got a chance to have a good career if he can keep his knees healthy.
I would take his brother.
Yeah, I was going to say Steven. I think he's been a lot more reliable receiver than I think he just looks so much more athletic than he did last year.
Definitely
I think
does,
he definitely slimmed down the offseason. And last year he dealt with the concussion stuff after that UNC game. I think he's been a real boost to this offense, especially with Ali out. You need another reliable receiving threat out there, and he seems to get open and make plays. Defensively, maybe Phildarius Payne. I mean, Payne started last week.
That's a good pick.
He didn't have big stats in that game, but he has been somebody who has put up some numbers, gotten in the backfield, made some plays. So he might be the biggest surprise on that side of the ball. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like I wouldn't have been surprised necessarily before he tore his Achilles, but you never know how somebody's going to respond coming off a torn Achilles.
That's a major injury.
It is.
To come
It's
back
a huge
from.
injury, and not only is it a huge injury, but he changed positions. Like he moved to the inside, to defensive tackle, which I think gives him a pass rushing advantage. So yeah, Payne would be my pick there. I don't think I have any surprises on the special, but maybe Tootin returning the kickoff return.
It's such a limited field on special teams.
So I guess
Cole Nelson is my surprise on special teams. I didn't know he had that sort of running ability in him.
I'd say Cole Beck because he seems to go down with an injury every time we play at home this year on a special teams play.
He looked like he hurt his arm.
He was in a sling, apparently.
Yeah. Last time it was like his leg or something. I was just like, oh no, poor Cole Beck. I was like, you just got to stop playing football and keep running.
How about Kyle Lowe toughing out the shoulder injury?
That's right.
And that changed their strategy completely on kickoffs after that, too, after he got hurt.
Was that why he shanked one out of bounds?
It had to be. And then after that, they just went with short kicks the rest of the game.
Yeah. He shanked the one out of bounds after they gave up the long touchdown. It's like, well, it's not 90 yards, so just give him at the 40-yard line or whatever it goes to. That's not the worst thing, I guess.
He's got a bye week. Do you think he would...
A good time for it.
Yeah, a great time. I mean, he's so good at creating touchbacks. Like, he really doesn't give opportunities to return very often.
That was only the fourth kickoff this year that a team had returned against Virginia Tech. Like, you talk
He's
about
such a weapon.
You talk about Virginia Tech, like, oh, they weren't ready for it. Like, the Hokies weren't really. They have not seen many this year. They haven't had to defend many. Like Kyle Lowe, he's almost a touchback machine.
I need to look it up and actually check the percentage of touchbacks this year. Like, I doubt there's very many teams, if any, that have a higher touchback percentage.
I mean, he was before that kick. I was listening to the radio broadcast, and Bill Roth said that was his. Before that kickoff, he had 32 kicks, 28 of which were touchbacks.
Yep. So Bill jinxed it.
That's like
no, he said that after the kick return.
That's like Joey Sly numbers.
Yeah,
remember Joey Sly? He was like automatic.
The only time Joey Sly sometimes would get bored and do a short one just so he could make the tackle. Because he used to spear some dudes.
I mean, he was a well-built kicker. I mean, he still is. You look at him.
He's in the NFL.
Gun show out there, showing it off there. But yeah, he had a booming leg for sure.
What else you got, David?
Chris, you wrote yesterday about Brent Davis.
Yeah.
We got a question that somebody wanted you to speculate a little bit more. Was it A, these plays were always in the playbook and Bowen never called them, or B, new plays were suggested by Davis leading into the Pitt game? Their follow-up is, if Davis is really having such an influence, how big of a deal would it be if he potentially goes somewhere else?
Yeah.
So how big do you think, you told me after the Pitt game that you thought Brent Davis had an impact based on the triple option, some of the stuff that Tech was running. I asked Brent Pry afterwards and he kind of like nonchalantly said, yeah, he's been a help. What do you think that impact of Brent Davis is, and why do you think, like, I don't know if we'll ever know specifically for sure, but why do you think this offensive change has just magically decided to come right now?
Okay, good questions. And a lot of people don't know who Brent Davis is, even some of our subscribers. We've written about him, several times now, but there were questions. I mentioned him in my article yesterday, and people were like, who's that? Brent Davis is the former offensive coordinator at Army for 9 seasons, who joined the staff as an offensive analyst in the spring, specifically to help with the running game. And he's been working with the offensive line, but I texted Will after the first drive of the Pitt game and said something like, this offense is so different with the type of play design. It looks more like an Army offense with all the men in motion and the misdirection and things like that. That was just me speculating while I was watching the game live. And then somebody emailed me the next day and said, I've heard from a good source that Brent Davis had more control of the offensive scheme this week. And I'm like, well, that makes sense because that was my initial impression. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I know this, like, Tech ran pretty much the same thing for 15 games under Tyler Bowen. And then magically you wake up one morning and, like, I'm not going to say everything has changed, but a whole lot has changed. I mean, that offense is vastly different. So, and if that's what's happened, then great. I mean, you should be making use of your experienced offensive analyst who used to be a very successful offensive coordinator. I think so. And again, we saw some triple option against Pitt. You saw some option against Wake Forest, and it's one of those things you'll never know for a fact. My inclination is that yes, they are taking some of his stuff seriously. But again, I don't know it for a fact. I hope that's incorrect though. I hope it's all Tyler Bowen, because if Brent Davis gets an offensive coordinator job somewhere else in the offseason, then he would be gone, and you would lose that influence. But yeah, it's something I've got in the back of my mind, but I'm not really thinking about it too much right now, because I'm just happy to be going in the direction that they're going over the last few weeks, and we'll cross the bridge when we get there at the end of the season if Davis were to leave or something like that. But to be very, very clear, I want to point out that even if Davis's hands are on the scheme more to a certain extent now, it's still Tyler Bowen calling the plays. So it would be a group effort. So they've done a good job as a group turning things around.
Well, even if he has a major influence on it, Brent probably won't say that.
Correct.
First of all, he wouldn't undercut his offensive coordinators like that. Second of all, analysts aren't supposed to be coaching.
Exactly.
Every team's analyst does a little bit of coaching, but like Brent Davis can't have a headset on the field. Like you're not supposed to be like out there instructing players and stuff. I remember when Jerry Kill was here and we asked a running back, I think it was Deshaun McLeese, like, what do you see after that? Is like, I came right over to Coach Kill on the sideline. He was telling me to do this and this. And afterwards, the SID, Pete Morris, comes up and is like, I think what Deshaun meant to say after that was this. It's just like trying to clarify. Is like, those guys can't technically be coaching like that during the game. So that's why, even if you ask Pry about it, he went through everybody on the roster, basically, of those quality control and analyst type guys. Like, they all contribute a lot. So, I don't know if you'll ever get the truth about what is going on there, but that's one technicality of that whole thing.
It's the whole Narduzzi story at Pitt when their compliance people come to practice. Like Pitt's got some kind of code where like all their analysts like move to the sideline and stop coaching or something like that when their compliance people come to practice. But this is normal big time college football stuff. So it's like the transfer portal. No one would ever use NIL.
Wink, wink. Nobody would use NIL. Nobody's contacting these guys ahead of time.
Absolutely not.
It's like NBA free agency. It's like they signed at 12:01 when the free agency opened up. How'd they negotiate that so quickly?
How did you sign an 8-page contract?
Yeah.
And
I want to touch on the McDonald's brothers for a second. They both kind of came out of nowhere. Jordan, he played 21 snaps at an 86.3 PFF grade. Jaden started at will linebacker. Mm-hmm. He played 45 snaps, had a 70.3 PFF grade. Just quick on them, and I've got one more question after this. But what did you like about the McDonald brothers? We haven't really seen them do much at all this year, and I believe Jordan didn't even have a tackle leading into that game, and then he had like a sack and a tackle for loss or something. Mm-hmm. What about their play, maybe Jaden at will too, surprised you?
Jordan, he'd been playing, some spot snaps here and there. I think what was most impressive to me is like with that grade, it wasn't just that like, oh, he had one good play. Like he was solid his 21 plays in the game. Like he did a good job. He was consistent. Jaden is interesting because I think he played both positions in this one. But yeah, he got the start at will. And Kelly Lawson had been struggling big time against the run. So Tisdale and Lawson coming into this game had, out of like 203 linebackers in the country with X number of snaps, I think they ranked 197th and 200th in their run grade defense this year. So that's from a numbers standpoint, I know people hate it when I point out negative stuff like this. That's the worst linebacker, inside linebacker duo in the country, right? It's got to be. So something had to change there. And the thing is, what was Kelly Lawson's grade?
Kelly Lawson graded out as a 79.9.
Had the best game of the season.
And he did not start.
Correct.
But he played 34 snaps.
Throw a little competition in there. Fire a shot across somebody's bow, maybe. But again, the way offenses, with their quarterback issues and how Tech was able to manipulate them into throwing it a lot, you weren't challenged as much there as you are against a traditional offense. I said last week that I don't think they should run as much of the slow mesh because I think if you don't have the right quarterback, it could be counterproductive. And I think it certainly was for them in this game. But So yeah, it was a different challenge this week, and Syracuse will present a more difficult challenge from a traditional run game standpoint, but big step in the right direction for those guys. They've always had a great work ethic. They both look the part. They both definitely look the part, and
they are specimens.
Yeah,
They are.
I remember
high school safeties, right? Or cornerbacks?
Yeah, cornerback and like a
defensive
safety.
backs. It's like,
Yeah.
those guys grew into a line. I was always curious how they decide one was going to be a linebacker and the other was going to be a defensive end.
They were both.
They like flip a coin or something like that. They're identical twins.
Fry's first spring, I think that he was playing them both at Sam at one point.
Yeah,
and then they moved. They eventually moved Jordan to defensive end, and poor Jaden's ended up playing all three positions during his short career so far. I remember what stood out to them when they were being recruited is like, I think it was still during COVID, so you couldn't go to the gym and stuff, and they had like this weight room at home, and like some of it was outdoors, and they're out there like doing arm curls in the snow and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, these guys really want it.
They were set to go to Louisiana Monroe, correct?
They were.
They flipped. They got like a 2-for-1 at Tech, and then the other one is now on scholarship too. So pretty good deal.
Yep.
The last question I have, Chris, you touched on this a little bit. Virginia Tech entered this season. There were 7 players that could not come back at the end of the season. 2 on offense. That was Nick Gallo and Ollie Jennings.
Oh no, Jennings. Oh, that's right.
Jennings
couldn't originally, but yes.
Yeah, this is entering the season. Ollie Jennings and Nick Gallo could not come back. And defensively, Mario Kendricks, Norrell Pollard, Feldarius Payne, Alan Tisdale, and Nasir Peoples. Mm-hmm. So you're losing 5 guys on the defensive side of the ball, but both guys on the offensive side of the ball that could not before the season come back could now apply for medical red shirts. Andy, when I tell you that, and you now have seen Tech play 7 games, you think Tech probably has a good shot to make a bowl. How do you see Tech's overall talent level and depth setting for 2024?
I think it's solid. I mean, it all depends on what you do in the transfer portal, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, these rosters aren't as static as they've seemed like in the past, and there's always going to be pruning that goes on the bottom half of the roster. You got part of an incoming class in. I wonder how many spots they keep open now instead of saying we're going to take a bunch of high schoolers, bringing us a bunch of transfers and plug some holes. So, I think it could be solid, and we don't know what some of these guys are going to do for next year. I mean, Ali could come back. He's also been in college for a long time. Maybe he's just like, it's time to move on. A lot of guys don't like to be in college for 6-7 years. It's played out. They've done that before. It's time to move on to the next thing in life. So sometimes it's not always just football considerations when you're thinking about this stuff. But, the 2 tackles leave. They've got to shore up that tackle spot. I think they got to find
3
some.
with Payne.
Fugo, who knows what he does? I mean, he could come back. He could move on. So I think that's a spot you really have to target through the portal. I think we've talked about the Mike linebacker spot a lot here. Offensive line, I think they probably could use some help there. I know that's a group that's going to improve with age, but if you can find somebody that can step in and really be an immediate contributor there. So it's tough now to go like, this is what the 2024 team will look like, because you could get to January and not even know what the 2024 team look like based on how many transfers are coming in.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We didn't get APR till what? Couple months before the season. It was later on. It was either last transfer edition,
February maybe.
No, it was after spring ball.
So after, okay,
that's right, because he was that was a late.
It was like
later
April.
one. Yeah, so that's probably even more impressive that he wasn't even here in the spring to learn the scheme and everything like that. He's such a beast. I think
to learn, just shoot off the edge and beat the tackle and get to the quarterback. He's got that ability. Yep. That's what they brought him here for.
I think I feel good about the offense. I'm not saying every single one of those players will come back, but I think enough of them will come back where it'll be just fine. I think Tech has recruited well at wide receiver, so even if 1 or 2 of those guys don't come back, then I think you'll have some guys in the program that are going to be able to take a step forward and replace them. Both running backs are eligible to come back, of course, and so if you want to take a look at anything from a transfer portal standpoint on offense, it would probably be the offensive line. What positions would you want to target there and how many? The big thing for me is the middle of the defense. So defensive tackle's got to be a huge focus. There's a certain Mike linebacker in an in-state school that I'd be very interested in bringing to Virginia Tech. Not that I would ever condone such actions. And then, make sure you have a free safety to replace people. So the inside of Tech's defense is going to look a lot different next year.
Yeah, I love the fact that Brent Pry has said, and of course there's exceptions to every rule, but he's put an emphasis on we don't necessarily want to bring in one-year guys to transfer. Like we want guys that are going to be here a little bit longer. Now, Ali was an exception to that.
Yeah.
But that's such a talent that you're you can't not.
You're taking that. They've done such a great job, I agree, of bringing in portal guys with multiple years of eligibility left. Like Drones will have 2 years left after this. Tootin, Powell, Ryland will have another year. Felton and Lane will have another year if they want it. Right. Canteens technically got 2 more years if he wants it, because he got hurt and there was a COVID year. So yeah, there's still a lot of potential for growth from those guys who are in the program.
Absolutely. All right, fellas, I think it's time to wrap things off. We've gone quite long today, but I will ask what's coming up on TSL this week, and let's make a decision right here, the four of us. Are we doing a pod on Thursday, or how are we feeling? It's a bye week. What's the vibe?
We'd have to come up with something different to talk about. I mean,
for sure.
Otherwise, we would just repeat ourselves from what we said today.
Yeah, it might be better just to hold off.
I think we just hold off this week and focus on some mid-season content. Like I said, I'm going to write an article highlighting some of the plays within Tech's offense and how things are so different from what they were before. And it's not going to be heavy analytical or anything like that. It's just going to be I like these plays and here's why I like them and here's why they work. And then, other than that, I got to kind of think about it. Do you even know the media schedule this week?
Just Wednesday.
Just Wednesday.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got to put our heads together and
Tuesday.
Yeah. Right. So
we gotta keep it open next week. Media's on Monday.
Media's on Monday. Games Thursday. So when are we going to do the pod next week?
I don't know. We've got to talk about it.
We'll talk about it. Stay tuned. And of course we'll blast it on Twitter and whatnot. Yep. We'll make it very well known. What is coming up though this week for you guys?
Mid-season report, highs, lows type stuff. And, cool. We'll brainstorm it, come up with something. Sweet. David?
I'm going to have some basketball stuff. It was a long day for me on Saturday. Open basketball practice for Tech. We obviously had Mike Young on our podcast set just the other day. That was a great podcast with Chris and I. Went about 50-ish minutes.
Give that a listen.
Yeah, Mike's great. Tech Scrimmage Liberty on Sunday. Still trying to find out some details on that maybe.
Yeah.
But no, I think next week I'll be down Monday night, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'll be down in Charlotte for basketball media days. So I think I might write something on just how I might vote for ACC preseason awards and standings and where everybody stacks up. I mean, this is basketball season's almost around the corner now. Crazy to think.
Yeah,
3 weeks from today, the basketball season tips over.
And I'll put out a basketball column later this week too on my thoughts to the season, because I haven't been able to get to that because of so busy with football season. But also from that standpoint, good time for a bye week. Start on a little bit of basketball.
I believe we'll have Kenny Brooks on the podcast this week.
Beautiful.
Yeah, should have Kenny Brooks, women's basketball head coach, off a Final Four berth.
And we're going to have Carly Wenzel as our Triumph Spotlight this week as well. So lots of basketball content coming up. Well, gentlemen, thank you as always. Always fun to get on here after a win on a Monday. We'll definitely see you next week. Get you ready for that Syracuse game. But for Nick Brown, for David Cunningham, for Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long, and we'll see you next time on the Tech Sideline podcast.